Chapter 6, Sweet 16. The story of the birth and rise of Airbnb is fascinating and a great example of wealth building by the platform. I don't plan to go into that story here, but if you're not familiar with how it was founded, Google it. In 2016, we opened our first Airbnb, which was a 2,800 square foot, 3-bedroom, 2-bath house adjacent to the Cloverdale Entertainment District in Montgomery. Admittedly, it was a defensive move, as that particular house was on a busy and noisy street that tended to turn off prospects with pets or small children for long-term leases. To me, this didn't feel like a negative if we repositioned the house to a short-term rental, especially with all the shops, restaurants, and bars in the immediate vicinity, including a cool bistro that adjoined the property's access. Airbnb restricts its guests from having pets anyway, and if Airbnb prohibits something, then surely it will unleash the full fury of the organization to right any wrongs committed by the offending guests. Right? Sure enough, once we furnished the place and put it into Airbnb, bookings were brisk, and in our first year, we did about 250 room nights. We quickly garnered a superhost status and got a bunch of repeat bookings and referrals. And we enjoyed healthy cash flow until April of 2020. That's a story for later. Our sweet spot was a 3-night stay involving 1 to 3 guests. More guests require more laundry, and longer stays often required us to block off the following day to have sufficient time to wash linens and clean. After a year of decent operations, we opened 2 more Airbnbs in the immediate area, installed a centralized private laundry facility, and converted our sheets and linens to all white, which combined to simplify and greatly reduce turnover time and process. Across the small portfolio, our bookings grew steadily, and we were operating in an extremely efficient and profitable manner that allowed us to pay off a couple of mortgages. On a weekday, our booking coordinator called the office to tell us that someone who had rented one of the Airbnbs for the upcoming weekend wanted to walk through it a couple of days in advance. I nixed the request, and we checked the guest's Airbnb profile but found no complaints of record against them. Supposedly, they were from Atlanta, but apparently were in Montgomery several days ahead of time, which seemed a little out of the ordinary, but not particularly alarming. A day later, I received a call about a suspicious car in front of the house and went to investigate. In a nonchalant manner, I walked past the car to notice 2 women sitting in it, with one talking on the phone while pointing to our house. Acting as if I owned the place, LOL, I walked up the steps, retrieved some junk mail, and walked back past the car to let the 2 women know I saw them. As I did, one called out to me and repeated the story from the day before, saying they needed to inspect the property before they rented it. As politely as I could, I declined, and after returning to the office, we contacted Airbnb customer support, convinced something didn't feel right about this reservation. Airbnb's support was almost condescending, saying if we canceled the booking, not only would we have to pay a penalty, but that we would lose our superhost status. So, against my better judgment, I instructed my staff to stay the course. As early as mid-morning on the Friday of the one-night booking, we started receiving requests for early check-in, though the guests did not want to pay an early check-in premium. With a standard 4 p.m. check-in, from 11 a.m. to 3:59 p.m., the same 2 women in the same car sat outside the house waiting. I'm no prophet, but I knew trouble was brewing. After they checked in, Our cameras, situated at the front and back exterior doors, picked up a flurry of activity as people came and went regularly. Many carried boxes, but none carried luggage. Surprisingly, by 10 p.m., the place was calm and quiet, and it appeared our guests had settled in for the night. I retired an hour later, but was awakened at 2 a.m. by a buzzing cell phone. When I answered, the neighborhood association president was screaming intensely over the phone. Half asleep, all I initially heard was, "Hundreds of them, and somebody's going to hurt someone before the night is through." I think he meant me, and he planned to be the one doing the hurting. About to come undone, I quickly dressed and headed over to the property, but couldn't get close because of a procession of cars circling the block. Stereos were blaring, people were screaming at each other, and fights were breaking out everywhere. Only when I recognized one of our comforters in the street did I fully understand the gravity of the situation and mumbled to myself that there was going to be a heartache tonight. Mine. The "hundreds of them" comment from the association president was referring to the number of cars, not people. The throng more closely approximated 1,000 boisterous young people. It was a scene unlike anything the tranquil neighborhood of Cloverdale had ever seen. I parked as closely as I could and, armed with only a cell phone, walked toward my property. The house had a large front porch, and the porch furniture was strewn in the yard to make room for more revelers. Several dozen young people were standing around, and as I approached, I looked down to see 2 red dots floating across my chest from laser sights, though I never saw the potential shooters. I called 911 and retreated back across the street to wait for the police, who showed up in less than 15 minutes. The 2 cops were petite females. Initially, I was concerned they might not command whatever respect would be necessary to clear the huge crowd of partygoers. But after interviewing me briefly, they sprang into action and lay siege to the Airbnb. I watched in awe as these 2 took complete control of the situation. When they entered my house, they quickly struck up a conversation with several young people that they seemed to be familiar with or knew. One of the cops addressed the ringleader, saying, "You over here too?" Apparently the group was free-flowing back and forth between 2 different Airbnb rentals someone had secured for a multi-location Sweet 16 party that had been hyped for days on social media. The kids knew from prior experience that these particular cops were not inclined to take any shit off anyone, and within 30 minutes the party was vaporized. After profusely thanking the departing officers, I then got a good look at the aftermath. $5,000 and 3 full days of cleaning later, we were able to unblock our listing and get back to business. Tits on a boar hog are useless. More so was Airbnb. It was painfully obvious that the adult who procured the reservation with Airbnb was local and never intended to stay at our place. Instead, maybe as a birthday gift, they rented our place to give some young person turning 16 a place to throw a massive party at someone else's misfortune and expense. We were tremendously comforted by the knowledge that Airbnb intended to give the guest who booked our place a bad rating. Whippy! After all, their policy expressly prohibits using a booking for parties or events. To me, that's like walking by a fenced yard with a sign that says, "Beware of dog," while a teacup poodle yaps at you. It's not exactly a terrifying deterrent, and Airbnb handled our situation like weak sauce. As we worked to slowly claw back a small measure of profitability, I learned that a local celebrity booked our place for a return visit to his former stomping grounds. He had attended high school in Montgomery before becoming a college and professional football star as a starting defensive back for the University of Alabama and 2 or 3 different NFL teams during his professional career. I asked our staff not to invent an encounter in order to take a quick picture, though I secretly hoped I might bump into the guy at a local bar or restaurant over the weekend. If that didn't happen, no biggie, but if it did, I might feel compelled to ask him about the Airbnb, and if he bragged on it, maybe then I'd claim it and hope for a picture with him. I'm the boss, so do as I say, not as I do, right? Not exactly as I planned it, but about 4 a.m, my wish came true, and I got to meet the guy. Because I live so close to our 3 Airbnbs, my name and number is listed as the emergency contact with Airbnb. Number 23 was calling to report a sink that had fallen off the wall. Though he had tried to use the manual shutoff valves to the sink, the cold water side wouldn't turn off completely, and water was slowly but steadily streaming onto the tile bathroom floor, heading toward my beautiful hardwood floors in the master bedroom. I grabbed a water key and headed right over, shutting off the water at the street as soon as I arrived. Number 23 was waiting for me when I got there and immediately apologized for having to call me out at such a late hour. When I asked him what had happened with the sink, he replied, "I think I put a little too much weight on it." Before I could visualize how that could happen, 23 elaborated a little more. "I have a new girlfriend, and she's maybe just a little too adventurous. Here's my contact info, and I'll pay for any and all damages." Chuckling, I thanked him for being honest and admitted that I knew who he was. "It's going to also cost you a picture with me," I demanded. With a sheepish grin, number 23 replied, "Sorry, no pictures on social media of me or the sink damage being attributed to me. It might be hard to explain." With that comment, I noticed he wore a wedding band. Well, okay, then I thought to myself, and roll tide. After I reached out with the final tally, he sent an extra $500 for my trouble. He was super nice and honest, at least with me. College football's 2019-2020 season culminated with LSU's Joe Burrow hurling his Tigers to the Natty after blistering Clemson. Soon after, Reddit threads started buzzing about a deadly virus in China that was spreading across the globe. Then, cable news started sprinkling in secondary stories talking about something that sounded like Corona Light, as well as a word that started with a P, and not the vulgar ones. I blew it all off. Get your mind out of the gutter. In the modern world, I convinced myself that pandemics were a thing of the past. It was the highly publicized outbreak on the cruise ship Diamond Princess in February of 2020 that woke America and me up to the reality of the impending crisis we faced worldwide. After 14 people died on the ship, I realized 2020 would be unlike any year I'd ever faced in our business. Almost immediately, our Airbnb bookings vaporized with no new reservations coming to take their place. By April, the world was in full lockdown mode, and the pain spread from our Airbnb business into our apartment business. Most of our tenants in the hospitality industry lost their jobs, and we experienced multiple and simultaneous defaults of our lease agreements. Trying to get on the front end of a looming liquidity crisis, I contacted my primary lender and negotiated an interest-only interim loan modification to our latest mortgage. It was enough to keep us afloat. For us, though the pandemic was challenging financially, we probably fared a lot better than my friends in the restaurant or bar business. We got through it without much room to spare, but we got through it. Soon that same banker came peddling something else that started and ended with the devious letter P and sounded even more obscene. It was called the PPP. The payroll protection plan loan options his bank administered were supposed to wow me, but it only took about a half second for me to pass. Back in 2010, when a deepwater oil well operated by British Petroleum ruptured and caused an environmental catastrophe in the Gulf of Mexico, just off the Alabama coast, the geniuses in Washington concocted a plan to beef up the local economy of the affected Gulf states by printing money and offering to loan it to businesses and individuals that might be able to claim some adverse business consequences. A different banker pitched the program to me then and concluded his presentation by saying, "Hey, it's damn near free money. Someone would have to be an idiot to turn it down." I resembled that remark. I passed but followed with keen interest when, several years later, the IRS and government went after scores of participants that abused the supposed intent of the program, including bankers that were incentivized to place the money and cut corners to do so. During the COVID-19 crisis, I surmised that taking the PPP money in the best-case scenario meant having to become buried in paperwork and subjecting our business to a time-consuming audit. As the story unfolded, by 2024, scores of people, including several celebrities, were indicted for fraud related to the PPP program. Most claimed they made honest mistakes in the application process, which I find hard to believe, but possible. Maybe you feel differently as to your own experience with PPP, but for me, if something looks and smells like a turd, then it probably tastes like shit. And I feel the same way about SBA loans. Back to the Sweet 16 party in our Airbnb, the boxes we observed being carried into the house were apparently filled with fake silk rose petals. The young partygoers spread them several inches deep in every room in the house. Their texture makes them cling to everything, including hardwood floors, so you can't easily shop vac or sweep them. As such, I must have personally picked up well over 1,000 of them. And I truly believe that Dante's Inferno missed a whole new level of hell, one where condemned souls must pick up those goddamn rose petals for eternity. Our Airbnb business never recovered from the pandemic. We struggled to cover our operating expenses as the platform seemed to suffer from oversupply and falling demand, and inflation soared. We've moved back to conventional leases, and though our revenue potential is a little less, our expenses dropped by half. And the pain in the neck factor and frustration in dealing with Airbnb is gone forever. You might fare better than I did if you enter the short-term furnished rental business in 2025. Just don't go into it wearing rose-petal glasses.